Welcome back to another episode of Health is Wealth. And thank you all so much for tuning into this week's episode. And as always, I am beyond grateful and thankful from the bottom of my heart to each and every one of you who is tuning into today's episode and also tuning in to help support the podcast. As every week we are sharing a new episode, just sharing words, thoughts of hopes, inspiration, and motivation to hopefully bring value into your world today. So once again, thank you so much for being here. And what I wanted to briefly talk to you about today is momentum. And I think, momentum is one of these things that once we start building in, we need to do everything in our power to not let it stop. Because once we start to gain some traction in an area in life, the last thing that we want to do is stop that thing in motion, because it's hard, to start back up again. And I think that's oftentimes like one of the things we all probably struggle with the most is sometimes, we get going on something and then maybe it gets too hard, maybe it gets too difficult, maybe, we're just getting exhausted mentally, physically, like going through the motion of a direction that we're heading. And then we kind of stop that momentum. We let it slow down a bit. Perhaps, we're trying something, we fail, and then we just completely stop, right? And then we lose all of this momentum that we build up. And, I think it's easier when we build momentum to keep things going than to start it back up again. And so this message is just this, right? If you have any momentum that you are building or you're going to build towards a direction of a goal that you've got, a thing that you want to accomplish, something that you want to achieve, even when it gets difficult, even if it's tiring, even if it's hard, even if it's frustrating, whatever it may be, we have to do everything within our power to keep that momentum going. Because I've noticed too that, when we have momentum going, it only can build stronger. Yeah, we have these like dips where, things are hard, things are difficult, things are frustrating. If we're on pace or on track, to a direction of things that we are achieving. But, the worst thing that we can do is when in anything that we're working towards, when things get hard, things are difficult, is to just stop, right? Is to give up, is to slow down a bit. Because once we stop, it's very difficult to continue or to pick that pace back up again, And so it just seems, even though it is tough, it seems easier that if we have momentum going, in a direction in life, we have to do everything that we can to keep it going. Because if we're able to push past those points to when times are hard and times are difficult, oftentimes we'll get another wind again that could help increase that momentum into something bigger, right? And it's one thing that I noticed for sure, even on my own things that I'm working towards, that when I completely stop something, lose all momentum, and it's extremely tough to pick that thing back up and get going again. But like right now, I feel I've got so much momentum, and I do got a few different things going on, but I have momentum going in certain directions. And so I'm doing everything I can just to keep pushing, even through things that are hard or tough or frustrating, and so forth, because I know that it's easier to continue that momentum, and that momentum will build up and become larger and increase. More so, it's going to be easy, starting back up again. And that's what I don't want to do in anything that I'm working towards right now, is just completely give up and, this thing's not working, I guess I might as well stop, etc., etc. Because that is the hardest part right there. That is when, we tend to give up up and throw in the towel and surrender and just say, I guess achieving this thing ain't for me. It's not made for me. I guess it's for somebody else, and so forth. So whatever that might be, for you in your life, whatever momentum you're creating or going to create, I think for all of us, it's a reminder that momentum is a very powerful thing. And once we can start building it, we need to hold on to it as much as possible and know we're still going to have these dips and crashes of when times are going to get hard and they're, frustrating and so forth. But I believe if we could push past that and we can kind of get, wind under our sail again, then it just, increases us continuing to push that momentum, but again, also just increasing the ability of more momentum to be created, which again is just something else that I've noticed, that the more I try to build on momentum of things that I'm working on and towards, the bigger this, the bigger the span of just how many different things are starting to work now in my favor, in my direction, and so forth, the more energy I put out into building this momentum, into keeping it going, and doing everything that I can to not stop. So again, momentum is a very powerful thing. Once we got it, we got to do everything we can to not lose it, even when it's tiring, even when it's hard, even when we struggle, because when we start to lose it, that's going to be the ultimate hardest thing, is to regain it, right? Is that momentum. And so if you've got it, do everything you can to hold on to it, towards whatever it is that you've got and working towards. And, if you're going to pick up momentum in a direction of something that you want to work towards, again, it's a reminder to just, keep going even when it gets hard, because it'll be even harder stopping and starting again. As always, thank you so much for joining me, and we will see you on the next one.